Hi, everyone. I'm Sontona Patterson, and I'm grateful to be here today to share my testimony with you. I hope my story will show you the power of having faith in Jesus. I want to start out by asking you a few questions. Have you ever felt like you couldn't change? Have you ever felt hopeless? How about desperate? Well, my story is for you. I grew up in a family with both parents. I had 4 sisters and 1 brother. I felt like our family was pretty normal. My dad would go to work and my mom would stay home to take care of the kids in the house. I remember my parents drinking on the weekends. Most of those weekends we would go to a babysitter's, but every once in a while we would get to stay home and they would drink there. I remember thinking it looks like they were having fun and I wanted to experience that too. I mean, after all, everything would go back to normal during the week. So what's the big deal anyway? So at 13 years old, I started stealing my parents' liquor. Not all the time, but every once in a while, so they wouldn't notice. It wasn't until I was 16 when I started doing it regularly. I started going to bars because I was going with my mom and dad. I was able to drink. Eventually, the bartenders would serve me without my parents being there. But just like my parents, I maintained my normal routine throughout the week. But I also was drinking while doing it. I moved out at 16 and was almost 17 and got my own place. I was still in high school at this time, but I continued to get good grades, so I really didn't see a problem with what I was doing or a need to change. I started dating my kid's father, and after about 8 months of being together, I got pregnant with our son. I was a senior in high school. I finally quit drinking so that my son would be a perfectly healthy baby. I graduated high school and had my son. I was working all the time to try to support my son because at the time my kid's father and I had split up. I remember feeling completely exhausted because I was working 2 jobs and then coming home to take care of my son. As a new mother, it was so overwhelming. Someone introduced me to cocaine. I had the energy to do everything I needed to do, and I didn't feel exhausted anymore. I'm sure some of you can relate. However, I didn't realize I wasn't fully comprehensive for my son because I was high all of the time. And from there, my life was led by poor choices. Still feeling stressed, I needed help with my son, and my kid's father and I got back together. But as most people would know, that turned into even more partying because we were both addicts. Fast forward a few years and I get pregnant with our daughter. I was hoping this would fix my partying and my addiction. I told myself, everything will work out. I will fix it all. I got this. But I didn't have it, nor was everything great. See, I was still struggling with my addiction while I was pregnant. When I had my daughter, I wanted a real life. A good one. But she ended up in Akron Children's NICU. Sorry. When I had my daughter, I wanted a real life, a good one. And when she ended up in Akron Children's NICU, I was so scared she wouldn't make it. She was premature, and she had breathing problems because her lungs were not fully developed yet. I was so depressed and my anxiety was through the roof. I remember watching her lay in an incubator, thinking in my head, how could I have done this? Thanks. Why did I let this happen? I am a worthless mother. And all that guilt just started to creep in. I was not saved at the time, so I didn't even pray or turn to God. I was just breathing and existing. I was wasting my energy on negative thoughts and pitying myself instead of actually doing something about it and trying to change. Then finally, after 21 days at the Akron Children's NICU, she got to come home. So that guilt, it left me for a short time. And I started repeating the same things I was doing before and getting high, never changing, working 2 jobs, coming home, taking care of my kids, again, feeling completely exhausted. But this time, the cocaine wasn't doing anything anymore, so I started trying meth. That gave me energy, the energy I needed, but that what does an addict do when they can't find their drug of choice? I'm sure you could have all guessed. Substitute it for what they can find. So I was introduced to heroin. I had energy and I didn't feel anything anymore. That was new to me. I was numb and I liked it. But that made everything so much worse in the long run. It took me down a spiral that I didn't even realize was happening. And before I knew it, I was in a dark world, a world I didn't realize I was even in. I lost custody of my kids and had never felt more hopeless, helpless, and worthless in my entire life. How did I ever let it get to this point? Well, you don't realize it until it's too late to do anything about it. But at that time, I still was able to do something. So I went to rehab in 2016. While there, I heard someone speak about the gospel and how there is hope and faith found in Christ. Well, at that point in my life, I had none of that, and I wanted to know more about this hope. So I started asking questions, and they shared Romans Road with me. They told me I am a sinner separated from a holy God, but there is hope. God gave us a gift. See, that gift is salvation through Jesus Christ, if we accept it. And I was intrigued, so I asked how to do that. So she read Romans 10:9 and 10, stating that if thou shalt confess with thy mouth the Lord Jesus, and shalt believe in thine heart that God hath raised him from the dead, thou shalt be saved. For with the heart man believeth unto righteousness, and with the mouth confession is made unto salvation. So that day, on the steps of the Harbor House, I did that, and I asked for forgiveness, and I was saved. However, I didn't really make Jesus Lord of my life. I was too prideful for that at that time. I thought I could control my life. See, I thought that after being saved, everything would go right, and my life would be perfect. But I did nothing to further my relationship with Christ. I continued to do the same things, act the same way, and think exactly the same. I didn't read my Bible, and I didn't even pray. I still wanted to convince everyone I could stay sober, but only long enough until I got my kids back. Well, I did get to see my kids. I got court-ordered visitation, but that lasted only for a few months before I relapsed yet again. See, I thought no one would find out I can manipulate the drug test. Why couldn't I? So it wouldn't matter anyway. If they do anything, I will just fix it by lying and manipulating like I always do. But obviously, I couldn't, and I lost visitation with my kids. And now had a restraining order for 5 years put on me. So at this point, that's when I fully, completely gave up. I didn't have a way out. I was lost yet again, so I turned to what I knew, even more intensely, to drown out every thought, feeling, and everything I was going through. I turned to heroin. It numbed everything. So now I didn't have to feel that guilt, pain, and shame of what I had caused in my own life. I had completely lost all hope. I thought this would always be the way it is. This is my life now. I am always going to be that worthless drug addict who can't do anything right. I remember at that point finally talking to God, but not for anything good. I was begging him to take my life because I didn't want it. I kept trying to stop getting high, but I just couldn't do it. I remember being so mad at myself for getting high. I would break my needles just to go find more and do it all over again. It was a vicious cycle for me. I remember ODing on purpose just to see if someone would bring me back or not. How crazy is that? Now that really is complete hopelessness. Because I was so desperate to die at that point in time in my life, I was pulled over by the cops 5 days in a row out of 7. And the 5th time, I asked the cop, "When can I get you all for harassment?" And they said, "Every time we pull you over, you have drugs on you. When is enough going to be enough?" He said, "You are going to die out here if you don't change." But what he didn't realize is that I was already dead inside. I was so lost, so broken. I was doing things I never dreamt I would do in my life. I would be so disgusted from what I was doing, I would get high to numb it all, and the cycle continued. until one day, those 5 times I was pulled over, it caught up to me. It caught up in the form of indictments, and I was arrested. Those indictments came with felony charges, and I ended up with 15 felony possession charges and a few misdemeanors. I remember sitting on the floor in the county jail when I was finally over detoxing. Let me tell you, that was rough. Surrounded by all of those indictments, trying to figure out what cases went with what judge, how much time I could get, and when court was for each case. I was overwhelmed. And then I overheard some girls talking in my pod, talking about how they couldn't wait to get out just to get high one more time. I got so nauseous, but not because of what they were saying, because I saw myself in them. That was the same way I had talked every single time I went to jail. And at that moment, I realized I needed a change. I knew I didn't know how to change, and I knew I couldn't, but I knew who could. I finally remembered Harbor House on those steps and getting saved. So I went into my jail cell and I prayed, begging God to help me and telling him everything I had done, and I asked him to be Lord of my life. I told him I knew I had no control, and I knew he did. And for the first time, I wanted him to have control over me. I cried and cried and cried laying in that cell, praying for forgiveness and looking back on all the damage and wrong I myself had caused and done. After that long, heart-filled prayer, I opened my Bible, and it was Psalm 51. I started reading it, and verse 10 stood out to me. It says, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me." So I began to memorize that verse. I said it over and over again. When I felt depressed, tired, ashamed, guilty, or tempted, I just kept saying that verse and praying for God to help me through the feeling or thought I was having. So I ended up going to court, and I was sentenced to 2 years in prison, SRCCC, and a few years of paper. That would start once I was released. I was okay with it. Whatever the outcome would have been, I was finally okay with it because I had realized that I myself had to deal with the consequences from my own actions. I had caused this, but I wasn't doing it alone. I had God on my side, so I felt safe and secure. I had an abundant amount of faith, and it just came out of nowhere. I was at peace with everything in my life. Only God could give that. I went to prison, and I grew my relationship with the Lord. I prayed and read and studied his word. I applied what I was reading at that point in time to my life. I wasn't perfect, and yes, I did relapse quite a few times. I couldn't understand why at the time, but then one day it finally clicked. I remembered reading, "An idle mind is the devil's playground, and he sneaks through in temptation." And the Bible says to meditate on the word day and night. So I read it even more. When the urge and temptation came, I went to my go-to verse, Psalm 51:10, and I would pray and just keep reading until it would go away. After a while, it always did, and those urges to get high would happen less. But it didn't happen overnight, not at all. With that, the Lord was strengthening me, though. He was preparing me for my life outside of those walls. I am so thankful for the transformative power he had in my life. I didn't see it in the moment, but looking back, I could see the process that he was taking over my life. Those moments where we struggle, we also are gaining strength and knowledge through experience that can help someone else who might be at that same spot you once were. And let me just tell you, while I was in prison, I had a peace that surpasses all understanding, something I had never felt before in my life. And that kind of peace only God can give. I got out of prison, and I had to go directly to the county jail to wait on a bed at SRCCC. Why that happened, only God knows. While there, I kept doing what was working for me. I continued growing with my relationship with God. I continued to keep reading and learning and praying. I would even do Bible studies in my pod with some of the girls so that they too could hear the words of God. I remember during one of our Bible studies, a sergeant brought us a book. He said, "Check this out. You girls might enjoy doing this with your studies." And that book is called Addicts at the Cross. So we read it, trying to teach ourselves, with God's help, the best we could. But then I had to go to SRCCC, and I left that book behind and asked the girls to continue reading it and keep doing the Bible studies. And I hadn't given it much thought after that. My PO kept asking where I was going to live after SRCCC. And she told me about a place called Victoria's House. I just brushed her off, telling her I have a place to go when I leave here, and I've already told her that numerous times. Then, at New Beginnings at SRCCC, Jen Ross also mentioned Victoria's Place to me, suggesting to go there. I was thinking, what is wrong with these people? I have somewhere to go. Then I heard, and here I am, trying to control my life yet again, making my own decisions and not even asking God. But God had other plans. He obviously wanted me going to Victoria's house. See, my friend I was going to live with after SRCCC had passed away 1 month before getting out of there. And like I said, God had other plans. And I want to add that God's timing is perfect, because the very next day we had another New Beginnings meeting, and Jen Ross was there. She said, "Have you given it much thought about going to Victoria's house?" And now it was time to finally give in. And I said, "Yes, I want to go." So she said she would pray on it and get back to me. She called a few days later and said I was going to go there. But I had already had faith in knowing that God was making that way. God always has a way of working things out if it's in his plan for you. So I get to Victoria's house on a Tuesday night. The owner of the faith-based sober living house comes to the meeting to teach us girls about a book. Remember that book I told you about that the sergeant in the county gave us girls, the Addicts at the Cross? It was the same book. So I told him that story, and he said, "I will help you understand it better because I wrote it." The house I was living at was the author of that book. I instantly looked up and said, "Okay, God, I know. I am in fact where you want me to be." I guess I'm a little bit of a slow learner. So God kept coming to me through others, trying to tell me how and where to go. But at that time, I was way too blinded to see it. So now I pay attention to everything. You never know when God is trying to throw you little hints like, "Hey, dummy, here's your clear answer. Now do you get it?" I was so grateful for the past and present miracles God was revealing to me at the perfect time. It reminds me to just understand that God is always with me. As it says in the Bible, He will never leave me nor forsake me. And there is always a greater purpose. Good or bad situations will always come out for the good of God, no matter how bad you think it is in that moment. It will always make sense later on down the road, as long as you trust in God and have faith in Jesus. Then I remember thinking back on how hopeless, helpless, and worthless I had felt. I no longer felt that way. I am happy, loved, and I have a purpose. See, a wise man wrote in a book a basic concept, and it states, God has a plan and a purpose for my life, and that plan is revealed to me through his holy word. I acknowledge the Bible to be my ultimate guide for laying the groundwork which will enable me to live a life free from addiction. When I finally grasped that, I had a meaning for my life. I learned to trust in God's plan and purpose for my life, letting him have control and leading the way. Always remembering God is working behind the scenes. If I feel like it's not going to work out, I remove that thought and I replace it with, if it's meant for me, God will give it to me or make it happen. And if it's not, then he won't. And I have full faith in him for my life. I will say life is not always easy, but I have accomplished so much with God leading the way. I remember a time when I didn't have a car, and I was working a few different places at Victoria's house. I would be praying, God, I don't know how I'm getting there, but I trust that you will make a way. And let me just tell you, I didn't miss not even one day of work at any of those jobs. I would sometimes leave one job and go straight to the next, not knowing who would bring me home or how I was getting home, but I knew God would help. As long as I continued to do my part, he would do his. Now, I am almost 3 years clean. I attend New Beginnings every Thursday, First Baptist Church every Sunday, where I am an active member at. I get to do outreaches and share the gospel with others. I am almost finished with my discipleship, where I have an amazing teacher, Jen Ross, who has been on my insane journey with me through it all. How she has put up with me this long, only God knows. I attend a couple different Bible studies throughout the week. I am a part of an organization called Smiling Eyes that gives back to the communities all over Ohio. I have successfully completed that probation I was on, and I have an amazing job where I'm a quality control manager. Who'd have thought? An addict and a felon. I have been able to restore my relationships with my family, and I am so grateful for my dad and all he has done for me on this journey. He finally trusts me. That right there is a gift from God, because he was always that tough love kind of parent. Of course, you could have probably guessed I was the black sheep. I had restored meaningful relationships and have gained so many more. My support system is truly amazing, and I have amazing godly mentors who help me along the way. I now get to be a part of my son and my daughter's life. I have unsupervised visitations with them, and I get 2 video phone calls a week on top of that. That is something I never thought would happen in my life ever again. I praise God every single day for it now. I am so grateful and blessed for the chances I've gotten at this life. I see the little blessings in everyday life, and I don't take them for granted. I have never-ending gratitude for all that I have been given from God. I am living proof that God can transform even the darkest of situations. I am grateful for the experiences and journey I've gone through that brought me to where I am today. And I'm excited to see what else God has in store for me. I want to encourage anyone who is struggling to turn to God. He can save you just like he saved me. It isn't easy, but it is worth it. Let Jesus take control and he will guide you, because he is the only way. I carry a rock in my car on my dash, and it says faith. It is to remind me that when I struggle to think that I can't make progress or won't be able to accomplish something, God can, and I have faith that Christ provides that way if he allows it. So I want to leave you with have faith in God, have faith in what God can do through you and for you. Just know that you are loved and valued to never give up. You have tried it your way, just like I probably have, feeling hopeless, helpless, and lost. So why not try God's way? You have nothing else to lose. I know I am forever grateful I turned to God, because I was that too far gone case. People would say you'll never change. That helpless drug addict that couldn't get anywhere in life, and that worthless junkie. But God changed my life, and he can change yours too, if you let him.
How deep the Father's love